They called me a retired dog, but I never stopped listening. That day, in a noisy schoolyard, I heard something no one else did. A silence. A man smiled at a little girl. And me. I growled for the first time in years. They didn't know it yet, but I did. Something was about to happen. I wasn't supposed to be working anymore. Not really. They called it retirement, though that word never quite sat right with me. Maybe for humans it means porch swings and long naps, but for me, I still smelled every lie in the wind. I still heard every tension hidden behind a voice. I still knew when something didn't belong. I just didn't wear the vest anymore. That Friday started like most others at Elk Ridge Elementary. I lay on the cool tile floor near Officer Avery's feet, my chin resting on my paws, ears half down in what looked like sleep. I wasn't asleep. I never really slept at school. Too many smells. Too many tiny footsteps and nervous energy. But I pretended, mostly for the kids. It helped them feel safe. Officer Avery called it the Pause and Peace program. Therapy visits, I think they said. I was brought in to help kids with anxiety, trauma, sometimes just the blues. I didn't do much. I let them pet me. I let them cry into my fur. I let them trust something warm and quiet. I liked Hannah. She wasn't like the other kids, louder, bolder, sticky with candy fingers. Hannah was soft-footed and always smelled faintly of lavender shampoo and peanut butter sandwiches. She liked to sit next to me on the bench out front while waiting for her mom, Rachel. Every afternoon like clockwork, 3:12 p.m. The last bell rang, and the kids exploded into the world like confetti, laughing, squealing, calling names. Parents lined the curb in idling minivans, windows down, radios low, phones in hand. But Hannah sat still. She always waited calmly. Sometimes she counted red cars. Sometimes she just hummed little songs to herself and scratched behind my ears. I liked that. That day, the sky was clean and blue, late spring, warm, but not yet summer hot. I remember the breeze carried the smell of fresh mulch from the playground and hot grease from someone's fast food bag. Nothing strange. Until he walked up. He wasn't in a rush, like the other grown-ups. No keys jangling, no impatient glances at watches. He moved slow, deliberate. Grey hair, charcoal peacoat, wire-framed glasses that caught the afternoon sun. And when he smiled, it was the wrong kind of smile. Too easy, too smooth. He stopped at the edge of the curb and waved with a hand that didn't shake. His voice, when he called out, was syrupy and soft. "Hannah. Hey, sweetheart. It's me, Grandpa Dave. Come on, come here." I lifted my head, eyes following his voice before my ears even moved. Hannah didn't budge, just blinked at him, confused. He stepped closer. "Your mom's tied up at the clinic. She asked me to get you today." Avery stood, posture polite but alert. She looked from him to Hannah. "That your grandpa, hon?" Hannah's mouth barely opened, her eyebrows pulled together, and her hand gripped the strap of her little backpack a little tighter. I stood up, slow. The man smiled wider. "It's okay. Your mom said you'd be shy." His hand reached toward her, and then I felt it. Not a sound, not a smell, something deeper. Something that prickled the short hairs at the back of my neck and settled like a stone in my gut. I don't growl anymore. Not since the day they retired me, but the growl came up through my chest like it had never left. Avery's hand went to my collar. "Easy, Shadow." I didn't ease. I stared at him, locked in, and let the growl grow. Deep, cold, controlled, a language older than words. Other parents were watching now. One mom paused mid-sentence. A teacher stepped closer. The man looked surprised. Maybe even a little annoyed. "I can show you ID," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. My bark hit the air like a gunshot. Hannah flinched. Avery stepped between them. "Sir, I'm going to need you to keep your hands where I can see them." He paused. then slowly pulled out a wallet and unfolded a driver's license. "David Monroe," he said. "Rachel Carter's father. I can show you pictures on my phone too, if you want." He handed the ID to Avery. She took it, glanced, frowned. "Wait here, please." I didn't move. My body was tense, tight as a coiled spring. My eyes never left his hands. My nostrils flared. Underneath his aftershave and wool coat, I caught something. Metal, chemical, not sharp like gun oil. Softer, muted. Wrong. Rachel always smelled like citrus and vet scrubs. Her real father used to smell like cedar and aftershave. I remember. He visited last fall. This man. He smelled like damp storage and metal cabinets. Hannah was crying now. Quiet tears. A teacher wrapped an arm around her. "That's not my grandpa," she whispered. "He doesn't smell right. Grandpa smells like cinnamon and soap." Avery glanced at me. I was still rigid, still watching. The man fumbled with a bag, black leather briefcase, clicked it open. Another bark. I lunged forward an inch before Avery pulled back on the leash. "Don't do that again," she snapped. "Keep your hands out where I can see them." He froze. Minutes dragged. Then the squad car arrived. 2 officers stepped out. One took the ID and the bag. The other gently asked Hannah to sit on the steps with her teacher. Avery and I stayed with the man. I watched the briefcase disappear into the patrol car. Then, as the officers turned away, I felt it again. Not toward the man this time, toward the briefcase. I growled. Avery noticed. "Wait, can we get that bag back here?" The officer opened it on the hood of the car. Inside, a bottle of sedatives, prescription grade, a roll of zip ties, and a pink baseball cap embroidered with the name Madeline. That wasn't Hannah's hat, but I'd smelled that hat before. A photo pinned in the staff room weeks ago. A girl missing from a nearby city. Same build, same blue eyes. The officer's voice turned low and sharp. "Turn around, hands behind your back." The man sputtered, angry now, but it didn't matter. He was cuffed, read his rights. Hannah clung to her teacher. I sat beside her, letting her small hand tangle in my fur. She didn't say much, just sat there. But when she looked at me, her eyes said everything. "You knew," she whispered. I didn't wag, I didn't bark. I just rested my head on her lap. That day, I wasn't retired. That day, I wasn't a pet or a therapy dog. That day, I was what I was always meant to be. And I wasn't finished yet. I couldn't explain it to them, not with words anyway. But there was something about that man that clung to the air long after the patrol car rolled away. A shadow in his scent, a tightness in the wind. It wasn't just that he didn't belong. He hadn't come alone. Not really. That bag of his might have carried sedatives and rope and a little pink cap. But it also carried stories. Stories that hadn't been told yet. Stories I could almost smell, like echoes. After the arrest, the crowd dispersed slowly. The principal cancelled after-school programs for the day. Parents clutched their kids a little tighter. The playground swings swayed in the breeze, empty now, creaking just enough to make the whole schoolyard feel hollow. But I was still locked in. My muscles were tight. My ears tuned to a frequency no one else seemed to hear. Avery stayed quiet. She didn't pet me or whisper, "Good boy," the way she sometimes did after drills or visits. She just stood next to me, her breathing slow, like she was waiting for the ground beneath us to admit what had almost happened. Rachel showed up, not long after the squad car pulled away. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her phone was still clenched in her hand when she slammed the car door and ran. I'd seen humans cry before. Happiness, sadness, even those weird snort-laugh cries they do during weddings. But what I saw on Rachel's face was different. It was the kind of fear that didn't know it had passed, the kind that still believed the danger was waiting around the corner. She dropped to her knees in front of Hannah and wrapped her arms around her so tight the little girl squeaked. "Oh my God, baby," Rachel choked. "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Hannah nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks again. "He said he was Grandpa." Rachel pulled back just enough to look at her face. "That wasn't Grandpa, sweetie. That wasn't anyone we know." She turned her head to Avery, and her voice changed. "Who was that man?" Avery crouched beside them. "We're still identifying him fully. His ID was fake. But your daughter is safe, Rachel. Thanks to Shadow." Rachel looked at me then, not like most adults look at dogs, like we're accessories or distractions or just lucky guesses on four legs. She looked at me like I chose to be there, like I'd known something they didn't. And I had. She reached out slowly and ran a hand along my neck, fingers brushing the silver in my fur. "Thank you," she whispered, like it was a secret. That night, they gave me steak. I didn't need it. I didn't even finish it. But the principal brought out a thick cut wrapped in foil and said it was the least they could do. I took a few bites, then curled up on the bench outside the school, where Hannah sat beside me, sipping a box of chocolate milk and not saying much. She reached down, fingers soft, and rubbed the fur behind my ears. "You knew," she said again, quieter now. Even when I didn't. I closed my eyes. I didn't need to bark. Not that night. Later, Avery and I rode in the back of the department SUV, parked outside the sheriff's office. She had a tablet on her lap, tapping notes into some official report. I didn't pay much attention to that part, but I listened. Inside, Officer Coleman was going through the contents of the man's briefcase. They'd sealed it all in clear evidence bags, zip ties, sedatives, a pink baseball cap with Madeline stitched on the front, and a small cloth handkerchief with tiny floral patterns. The whole table smelled like basements and forgotten places. Old things, dry things, scared things. Coleman's voice came through the door. Dispatch ran the ID. No one by that name in the state. No matching photo. No matching license. Avery leaned back in the front seat and sighed. "So it's fake." Coleman nodded. "A damn good one, too. Holograms, state seal, even the microprint. Probably dark web." They kept talking, but I stopped listening. I pressed my nose to the glass window of the SUV, breathing in the night. I couldn't explain it, but something in that bag didn't belong. Not just in the school, not just with him. It didn't belong anywhere. Hannah hadn't been his first try, and she wouldn't have been the last. Back at the Carter house, Rachel let Hannah sleep in her bed that night. I curled up at the foot, watching the moonlight move across the carpet like a slow tide. The window was cracked open, just enough to let in the smell of lilacs and the distant hum of late traffic. Hannah mumbled in her sleep. I lifted my head, listening. She wasn't dreaming peacefully. Her legs twitched under the blankets. I padded over to the edge of the bed, gently nudged her hand with my nose. She rolled toward me, half awake, and whispered, "You can stay right there, okay?" I stayed. The next morning, someone knocked on the front door. Rachel opened it to find Avery standing there in jeans and a plain t-shirt. No badge, no radio. Just a folder under her arm and a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I wanted to bring this by," she said. She handed Rachel a printed certificate with my paw print stamped in the corner. Certificate of Honor, awarded to Shadow, K-9 Retired Unit, for outstanding bravery and protection of civilians. Rachel read it, silent for a long moment. "Can we frame it?" Hannah asked, peeking around her mom's hip. Rachel smiled. "Absolutely. It's going on the wall." They hung it above the mantel that afternoon. That evening, as the sun slipped behind the trees, Hannah set a bowl of kibble by the window. Not in the kitchen. Right by the window, where the moonlight poured in. When Rachel asked why, she said, "Just in case Shadow wants to guard me from the moon." And I did. Every night. Because the man may have been gone, but the smell of him, of what he planned, still lingered like smoke after a fire. And somewhere deep in my chest, I knew this wasn't finished. He had a system. And we'd only just cracked the surface. It was quiet in the precinct that night, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes the fluorescent lights seem louder than they ought to be. I was lying just outside the main office, in my usual spot by the vending machine. Avery sat on a bench beside me, one boot bouncing softly against the tile as she stared through the open doorway. Inside, Officer Coleman was still at the evidence table, gloved hands methodical, moving like someone who didn't want to miss a single fiber. I could smell the rubber from his gloves, the plastic from the bags, and beneath it all, faint but cutting, was the scent that had set me off in the first place. Something metallic, not blood, not gun oil, older, mustier. Like the hinges on an old basement door, rusted but still clinging to purpose. The briefcase was open, its contents spread out neatly across a white linen sheet. Sedatives in a prescription bottle, zip ties bundled tight with a rubber band, a handkerchief, floral, faded from use. And then, the hat. That pink cap looked harmless to most folks. Soft fabric, stitched name across the front. Madeline. But I knew better. I knew what memory smelled like. And that hat didn't belong to Hannah. Coleman glanced up at Avery. "You recognize the name?" Avery shook her head. "Not from around here." He nodded toward the secure computer station at the back. "Let me run it." She watched him go. Then, under her breath, she said, "Shadow." I looked up. She didn't finish her sentence. Just reached down and brushed my side, like she needed something solid to lean on. I gave her that. I always had. A few minutes passed. Keys clacked. Then Coleman's voice floated back into the room, low and clipped. "We've got a match." Avery stood, eyes narrowing. "From where?" "Denver," Coleman called. 6-year-old girl, Madeline Rivera. Missing 6 weeks ago. Disappeared from a school parking lot while her mom was inside signing permission slips. I stood up. My tail didn't wag. My ears didn't twitch. But something inside me tightened. Avery crossed the room and leaned over Coleman's shoulder. "Same hat?" He nodded. "Down to the stitch. FBI's got the case. We just joined the dots." She swore under her breath, then turned and looked straight at me. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about Hannah. This man. They were calling him David Monroe, but I could feel that wasn't his name. He hadn't just stumbled onto our school. He was following a pattern, and that bag of his was the breadcrumb trail. They took the evidence to the lab, scanned fingerprints, bagged fibers, pulled surveillance footage from Elk Ridge's security cameras. None of it felt fast enough. That night, Avery and I rode home together. She lived in a quiet part of town, small house with peeling white trim and a bird feeder that raccoons raided more than birds ever did. I liked it there. It smelled of pine needles and old books, comfortable things. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the porch swing, staring out at nothing. I lay at her feet, the night air brushing through my fur like a whisper trying to speak. "You were right," she finally said. I didn't move. That guy, he knew exactly what he was doing. She leaned down and looked me in the eyes. Thing is, he didn't even look nervous, didn't stutter, didn't sweat. And that ID, Shadow, it was perfect. But you knew before he even spoke. I blinked slowly. It's not about what they say. It never is. It's how their shoes pause on the pavement, how their breath holds between words, how their scent carries the cold of something they left behind. Back at the station, a team was assembling. They pulled me in the next morning, early. No vest, no orders, but I walked in like I'd never stopped working. I could feel their eyes on me. Some of them were skeptical. Retired dog, therapy mutt. What's he gonna do now? But Avery stood by me, and that was enough. Detective Ryland, a man with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that looked like they'd seen 100 too many scenes they couldn't unsee, pointed to the board they'd built overnight. Photos, maps, timelines. In the center was the hat. "This man," Ryland said, tapping a blurry still from a surveillance camera, "isn't David Monroe. Real name's likely Eric Donnelly. Former school janitor in Oregon. Lost his job in 2011 after a complaint. Never proven. He moved around. 5 states in 10 years. Always under different names. Never stayed long. But wherever he went, a pattern followed." He pointed to a second photo. Another girl. Different school. She vanished outside a library in Tacoma. Her name was Elise. I felt the room quiet around me. We believe Donnelly's targeting young girls between 6 and 8, blonde, small stature, and, this is key, schools with low security at dismissal time. Avery spoke up. "So, why Elk Ridge?" Ryland gave a half shrug. "It fits. Quiet town. High parental trust. No full-time SRO on site. He probably scoped it for weeks. Waiting." Then he looked down at me. "But what he didn't plan on was you." I didn't blink. Humans forget sometimes. They think they own vigilance. But I've seen things before they happen. Heard danger in the footfall of someone 2 blocks away. And when it comes close, I don't ask. I act. They pulled the briefcase back out again. Let me sniff it. Something inside it made my lips twitch back slightly. Not quite a growl, but close. I nudged the side where the leather folded slightly more than it should. Avery noticed. "What's that?" Coleman leaned in, fingers tracing the seam. Then his eyes widened. "There's a lining in here." He pulled out a knife, careful not to damage anything, and peeled it back. Inside, flat against the hard paneling, was a USB drive. No label, no logo, just plain plastic. They plugged it into an offline laptop, and everything changed. Photos. Dozens of them. Kids at recess. Kids walking home. Kids waiting for buses. None of them posed. None of them knew they were being watched. Each file had a name, a date, a note. One folder stood out. HannahCarter.pdf. Avery's breath caught. "Shadow," she whispered. I stepped closer. It was a photo from last week. Hannah sitting on the school bench. My head in her lap. Her smile, soft and crooked. I remembered that day. I remembered the wind. That's when the panic started spreading. This man hadn't just picked Hannah at random. He'd been watching, studying, planning, and Hannah wasn't the only one. The briefcase wasn't just a bag. It was a hunter's ledger. A map of things no one else had seen. But I had. I didn't need a badge or a rank or a radio. I had instinct, and instinct was enough to know this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She held that milk carton like it was a lifeline. The small rectangular box crinkled slightly beneath her grip, but she didn't notice. She just sat there, legs dangling off the bench outside the principal's office, her back hunched and her eyes fixed on a crack in the sidewalk, like it might offer answers. I lay beside her, head resting on her sneaker, watching the sun creep along the concrete. No one had really explained what had happened, not in words a child could hold. They told Hannah she was brave, that she'd done the right thing, that the man was being taken care of. But none of that made sense to a girl who'd just been told a smile could be a lie. Rachel sat nearby, flipping through her phone like it owed her something. Maybe a missed text, a warning, anything that could undo the last 24 hours. But there was nothing there. Only silence and guilt. Guilt clings to people harder than blood ever does. Inside, I could hear the murmured voices of detectives and administrators, boots pacing tile, the soft clack of a keyboard. But my focus stayed on Hannah. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. I could hear the way she swallowed between each blink. She hadn't spoken since morning. Then she whispered, "He didn't smell right." Rachel looked up. "What, sweetie?" Hannah didn't turn her head. "He didn't smell like Grandpa. He didn't smell like anything I know." I shifted slightly, enough for her hand to find my shoulder. She held on like I might float away if she didn't. Rachel knelt beside us. "Hannah, you know you don't have to talk about it right now." "I'm not scared," Hannah said, voice brittle. "I just don't want to forget." Rachel blinked. "Forget what?" Hannah looked at me. "How Shadow knew. I want to remember how he looked before it all started, so I can know too." Rachel pressed her lips together, then nodded slowly. "Okay, baby. We'll remember it together." That night, they let me stay at their home again. I think the department knew better than to argue with Avery on that one. I wasn't just a dog anymore. I was a wall. Hannah insisted I sleep in her room. She laid out an old quilt for me right by the bed. I didn't need it, but I stayed. Her nightlight cast slow-moving shadows on the ceiling, little animals twirling in silence. Somewhere around midnight, I heard her crying. Soft, so soft it barely registered. I stood, walked to her bedside, and placed my chin gently on the mattress. "Shadow?" she whispered, not opening her eyes. I licked her hand. She turned her body, slid down the pillow, and let her forehead rest against mine. No more words after that. Just breath. Just warmth. The next morning, Avery picked us up early. The precinct was already buzzing when we arrived. There were more agents now, federal ones, different smell, different shoes. They didn't move like local officers, tighter, sharper, less used to letting dogs roam the halls, but no one told me to stop. In the main conference room, the briefcase contents were laid out again, this time under better lighting, and beside it, now unlocked, was the USB. They'd cracked it. On the screen, folders, rows and rows of them. Names like Candidate A, Denver. Option 2, Seaside. Trial Watch, Ridgefield. Each one had pictures, notes, ratings, kids, laughing, running, leaving school buildings. None of them were smiling for the camera. Because there was no camera. Just a man with time, patience, and something inside him that had rotted a long time ago. And there was Hannah, my girl. Her photo had been taken from behind the playground fence. You could see the way she sat on the bench with her legs crossed. I was lying next to her, barely visible behind the slats. The timestamp was from last week. Avery stared at it. He'd been watching her this whole time. Rylan crossed his arms. And not just her. He brought up another folder. A girl named Maya. Red backpack. Age, 6. Location, Seaside Pines Elementary. That school doesn't have a resource officer on staff, he said. Dismissal supervision is handled by volunteers. Avery's jaw clenched. So he was scouting multiple sites. Ryland nodded. He had a plan. Hannah was just the first one we interrupted. The weight in the room was thick, the kind that slows time. Then someone muttered, "If Shadow hadn't growled when he did." No one finished the sentence. They didn't have to. Later that afternoon, Rachel brought Hannah back to the station to sign a formal statement. I stayed close. Not because I didn't trust anyone, but because Hannah still needed a shadow to follow her. She wore her favorite shirt, blue with tiny cats on it. Her hands stayed curled around a stuffed animal, some old floppy-eared rabbit that had seen better days. Avery kneeled beside her. "Sweetheart, can I ask you something?" Hannah nodded. "Did your mom ever say someone else would pick you up?" "No." "Has she ever let anyone else before?" "No. She always sends a message. To my teacher, too. Every time." Avery turned to Ryland. "We'll need to confirm that. See if the school has records." They did. Rachel had never missed a notification. It was all fake. Everything the man had said. Back in the evidence room, Coleman called out, "You'll want to see this." He was holding up something small, thin, like a card. It had been taped to the inside flap of the briefcase. A bus schedule. Route 27, Bayfront Elementary, 50 miles south. Avery narrowed her eyes. "What's that got to do with anything?" "Maybe nothing," Coleman said. "Maybe everything." The schedule had one date circled in red ink. Next Thursday, 3:20 p.m. And beneath it, written in shaky block letters, one name, Maya. Ryland stared at the writing for a long time. "He was planning another one," he said. "Already had it lined up." Avery looked down at me. "You ready for a road trip?" I didn't wag. I didn't bark. I just stood, because I wasn't done. There's a kind of silence that creeps in when you realize the monster you've just caught wasn't working alone. It's not the kind of silence people are used to. Not like when the power goes out, or when a room clears after bad news. This silence is deeper, heavier, like the pause between thunder and lightning, when your instincts curl into a tight knot, waiting for something worse. We sat in the back of Avery's cruiser, parked outside Bayfront Elementary, watching kids spill out of the double doors in waves, backpacks swinging, voices bright and careless. They had no idea that, just a few days ago, one of them had been circled on a bus schedule. One of them had been next. Maya Benton, 6 years old, red hair, a lunchbox that said, "Be kind," in sparkly letters. I hadn't met her yet, but I'd seen her face on a printed sheet pinned to the back wall of the precinct. She was the second name on that list, the one the man in the grey coat never got to. But someone else might have tried. Avery's hand rested lightly on my back, her thumb moving in slow, steady circles between my shoulders. She wasn't speaking, just watching, waiting. I was too. The first thing I noticed was the way the air shifted. The wind carried a trace of old engine oil, cigarette smoke, and something else. Something sterile, antiseptic, like a hospital hallway no one had cleaned in weeks. I lifted my head and sniffed again. There, just past the playground, a narrow alley between two buildings, and in it, a man, standing still, too still. He wasn't smoking, wasn't checking his phone, just watching. Avery followed my gaze. "Shadow?" she whispered. I growled, low, quiet, controlled. She followed the sound of my warning and spotted him just as he turned to leave. Her hand was already reaching for the door handle. "Go," she said, and I went. My paws hit the pavement like thunder. Not bad for an old dog. My leash unclipped somewhere behind me. I didn't feel it fall, just heard it slap the ground as I ran. The man looked back, eyes wide. Then he bolted. I chased him through the alley, past a broken tricycle and a cluster of trash cans. He cut left into a dead end behind a loading dock. "No fence, no exit." I didn't slow down. I hit him square in the legs, my weight and training doing the rest. He hit the ground hard, but I didn't bite, not yet. I growled loud enough to shake his ribs and clamped my jaws around his wrist, just tight enough to pin, not to maim. By the time Avery reached us, her breath sharp and fast, the man was whimpering. I didn't touch her, I swear. I didn't even talk to her. But in his pocket, Avery found the list. 3 schools, 3 names, 3 time slots. And one of them, written in the same hand as the bus schedule, said, Maya, Thurs, 3:20 p.m. The man's name was Calvin Royce Miller, age 52. No outstanding warrants. No visible past that screamed predator. Just a long string of petty thefts, trespassing, and a couple of drug charges buried deep in county records from California. But something about him didn't sit right. Not just with Avery. Not just with Ryland. With me. He didn't flinch the way innocent people flinch. He didn't cry the way scared people cry. He sweated. And every time someone said child or school, his jaw twitched like a loaded spring. They brought him in for questioning. Placed him in interview room B, under the hum of fluorescent lights and the sharp eye of Detective Monroe, who had a way of leaning across a table like she already knew the answers. I stayed in the hallway, ears pricked, listening through the glass. "You were watching Maya Benton," Monroe said. Calvin shook his head. "I was loitering. That's not a crime." "You weren't loitering," Monroe replied. "You were waiting. You had her name in your pocket. You had the time, the place." He leaned back. "Doesn't prove anything." Then she said it. "Eric Donnelly had your number saved in his phone." He went quiet. Monroe slid a folder across the table. Photos, notes, a printed copy of the schedule with his handwriting on it. "Funny thing," she said. "Donnelly saved your number as Rook. You know what a Rook is, Calvin. It's the piece you move early, the piece you sacrifice." His hands clenched on the table. "He said it would be clean," he muttered. Monroe didn't speak. He said no screaming, no mess, in and out. From the other side of the glass, Ryland exhaled. "He just gave us Donnelly's role." Avery nodded slowly. "Donnelly was the architect. This guy's the muscle." I growled. They played him a recording next. Not of Maya, not of Hannah. Just voices. Tiny ones. Whispers. Laughter. And one, barely audible, saying, "He said it's our little secret." Calvin cracked. "They recruited online," he said. "Encrypted forums. Invite only. Donnelly. He ran it. Built profiles. Rated kids. Behavior, appearance, risk level." He looked at Monroe, defeated. "There's a whole damn system. We had a list." Monroe leaned in. "How many?" Calvin didn't blink. 4 successful. 2 failed. Hannah was a bust. The dog screwed everything. Avery's hand dropped to my head, fingers curling into my fur. I didn't move, because I'd heard enough. They weren't just taking kids. They were cataloging them, tracking, grading, distributing information like stock tips on some sick exchange. Later that night, the FBI task force pulled the entire digital forum Calvin had named. It was called Pavilion, password protected, hidden behind layers of code and redirection. Inside, folders, logs, chat histories, and names. So many names, some missing, some not. Yet, one tab read, Bayfront Option 1, Maya Benton. Another, Meadowview Candidate A, Hannah Carter. Another, Ridgefield Reserve B, pending. They hadn't just watched, they'd planned for what came next, but none of them had planned for me. I wasn't in their files, I wasn't on their radar, and that's exactly how I stopped them. Hannah hadn't said much since the night we got back from Bayfront. She was never much of a talker, not like some kids who poured every thought onto the sidewalk like sidewalk chalk. But this was different. She moved quieter. Her eyes stayed on the floor longer, and when she did speak, her voice came out softer, like she wasn't sure if it still belonged to her. She stayed wrapped in a fleece blanket that week, navy blue, with little white stars stitched across it. It used to be the one she curled up in on movie nights, half asleep with popcorn in her hair and peanut butter on her chin. Now, it never left her shoulders. Even in the middle of the afternoon, with the windows open and the breeze warm, that blanket stayed on. She clutched it like armor. Rachel did her best. I watched her try. Pancakes shaped like hearts. Extra marshmallows in the cocoa. Turning off the news. Turning up the cartoons. She didn't cry in front of Hannah, but I could smell it in her pillow. And in the hallway, when she thought no one could hear, her breathing sometimes hitched, like she was trying to hold herself together by sheer will. We all were. Avery came by almost every day. Not in uniform. Just her and that tired smile she wore like a badge when she didn't want people to worry. She brought little things. A coloring book, a new pencil set, a stuffed fox with a crooked grin. Hannah thanked her each time. Polite. Sweet, but never smiled. Not until Thursday afternoon. We were sitting on the front porch, me lying in the patch of sun that crept over the wooden slats. Hannah beside me with the blanket draped over her like a cape. She had one of the new pencils in hand and was drawing quietly on a piece of paper, balanced against her knees. I closed my eyes, listening to the soft scratch of graphite and the distant hum of a lawnmower down the block. Then I felt it. A shift. Her breathing changed. Not panicked, not scared. Calm. Steady. I opened one eye. She was smiling, just barely, just at the corners, but it was real. Rachel walked out and paused in the doorway, surprised. "Honey?" she said gently. "What are you drawing?" Hannah didn't look up. "It's for Shadow." Rachel stepped closer. I lifted my head as she reached down to take the page. She held it in both hands. It was me, drawn in broad, clumsy strokes, tail high, ears up, standing in front of a school building. Around my neck was a bright red cape. On the top of the page, in careful block letters, she'd written, "My hero." Rachel blinked fast and pressed the picture to her chest. Hannah finally looked at me. "I know you don't talk," she said softly, "but I think you still say things." I moved closer, pressing my nose gently into her hand. She didn't flinch. That night, she slept with the drawing beside her bed, the blanket still wrapped tight, but different now. Not like armor, like comfort. And for the first time in days, I heard her laugh. Just once. Just a little giggle in her sleep when the stuffed fox fell off the bed and landed on my head. I didn't move it, didn't even growl, just let it stay there until morning. Back at the station, things weren't as peaceful. Ryland was pacing. Monroe was bent over a whiteboard now littered with printouts and colored pins. The FBI agents had brought in more gear. Big screens, network logs, chain of custody forms stacked like novels no one wanted to read. The USB was a goldmine. A sickness, really. It had more than just names and photos. It had purchase logs, message archives, codes and aliases, chat threads with words that made even seasoned detectives step back in disgust. And then they found her. Not Hannah. Not Maya. Someone else. Folder name, Anna 2021, PRG. No last name, just the photo. A girl, maybe 8 years old. Big brown eyes, tight curls framing a face that looked too tired for childhood. She wasn't smiling, wasn't crying either. Just staring into the lens like she'd learned a long time ago, not to give anyone anything they could take. "Where's PRG?" Avery asked. "Prague," Monroe said, barely above a whisper. "Czech Republic." They started digging. No missing persons report, no school records, nothing. But eventually, someone tracked down an old, archived intake log from a children's home. Anna. Transferred there in 2018. Marked missing in 2021. Status, runaway. That was it. No media. No search. No one looked. Monroe stared at the photo, her thumb hovering over the edge of the printout, like she wasn't sure if touching it made her responsible. "This didn't start with Hannah," she said quietly. "And it didn't stop at Maya." Ryland looked at me. "You think they're all connected?" he asked aloud, maybe to Avery, maybe to himself. I stepped forward, sniffed the photo. That same smell. Not the girl, the memory. This was bigger than any of them realized. Donnelly wasn't a lone predator. He was a node in a network. And now that we'd pulled one thread, the whole web was starting to show. Later that evening, Rachel opened the front door to find Avery standing there again. She held a manila folder under one arm and a soft smile that, this time, almost reached her eyes. "I thought I'd bring this by," she said. Inside was a certificate, freshly printed, my paw print at the bottom in dark ink. "Certificate of Honor," Rachel read aloud. "Awarded to Shadow, K-9 Retired Unit, for outstanding bravery and protection of civilians." Hannah looked up at her mom. "Can we put it on the wall?" Rachel laughed through the lump in her throat. "Absolutely." She framed it that night, just above the mantel, next to the drawing Hannah had made. And before bed, like clockwork, Hannah placed my food bowl not in the kitchen, but by the window, the same one where the moonlight pooled onto the floor. "Just in case," she whispered. "He wants to guard me from the moon." And I did. Because I knew what waited in the shadows. I knew how far they reached. And I wasn't done. Not until every name on that list had someone watching over them, like I watched over her. Some people think predators make noise when they come. Footsteps in the dark, the slam of a door, maybe the bark of a dog. But the real ones? The ones who've done it before. They move quiet. They breathe light. They know how to wait. I've met men like that. Their scent doesn't scream, it whispers. We drove out to Harbour Brook Academy on a grey-skied Thursday. Ocean fog rolled in low and thick across the streets, hugging swing sets and bike racks like it wanted to keep secrets of its own. The school sat just a few miles north of Bayfront. Smaller, older, no cameras on the back lot, no full-time officer on campus. But they had a gate, and behind that gate, somewhere, was another child circled on a list we didn't finish reading. I sat in the back of Avery's SUV, my nose pressed against the glass, tracking the air for the thing I couldn't explain. Not the cold, not the salt, something else. Something watching. Avery leaned back from the steering wheel, her eyes scanning the alleyways. "Shadow," she said softly. "You see anything?" I didn't look at her. I was staring past the schoolyard, past the chain link, the peeling paint, the puddles still catching drizzle, into a sliver of space most people wouldn't bother with. And there he was, yellow poncho, hood up, standing by a green dumpster like he belonged there. But he wasn't smoking, wasn't scrolling a phone, just still, watching. Not the street, not the sidewalk, the children. My growl started low, the kind that builds in the bones first. Avery followed my gaze, then opened the door. "Go." I hit the ground running, the leash unlatched before she finished saying the word. The man saw me when I was 10 yards out. His body jerked, stiff, surprised, not like someone who'd expected company. He turned and ran, his boots slapping wet pavement, poncho flapping behind him like a broken sail. But I was faster. My paws pounded across the alley, through puddles and crushed soda cans, my breath even, my focus sharp. The alley forked behind a thrift store, but he didn't know the neighborhood like I did. He chose the dead end. By the time he realized it, I was airborne. I hit him in the back of the legs and brought him down hard, jaws around his right wrist, not breaking skin, just holding, like I'd been trained. He kicked and yelled, twisting like a caught rat. "I didn't touch her," he shouted. "I didn't do anything." Avery arrived seconds later, gun drawn, voice firm. "Don't move." He didn't, but his mouth kept running. "I was just passing by. I don't even live here. I don't even know what school this is." Avery cuffed him and patted down his pockets. Then she pulled out a folded piece of paper. Her eyes narrowed. "What the hell?" It was a list. 3 school names, 3 children's names, and 3 time slots. Harbour Brook was one of them. Maya's name was circled. He went by Calvin, but this one's ID said Brent. Last name fake, background muddy. But he fit the pattern, no job, no address. A long history of harmless charges, trespassing, stolen property, loitering. But now, we had context. He wasn't loitering. He was waiting. They took him to the local station, sat him in a steel chair under a buzzing light. I waited in the hall with my ears high and still. I didn't need to see him. I could smell him. The stink of guilt, of fear, of something not yet spoken. Inside the room, Detective Monroe leaned across the table. "We know who you are," she said, calm as rain. "And we know what you were doing outside that school." He sneered. "You've got nothing. Just a list. No action. No crime." Monroe laid out the photos. Maps. Timestamps. Pictures of children. Maya's sock, found behind the fence. The van seen on school cameras. The schedule in his coat. He twitched at the last one. Monroe didn't blink. "You were helping Donnelly. We know that. He spat on the floor. I never met him. Really. Because his laptop has your number saved as Rook. That word, that one word, broke something in him. He sagged. He said it would be clean, he muttered. No mess, no screaming. Outside the glass, Agent Shaw crossed her arms. Well, she said, that's our link. He talked for hours after that, about the forum, the grading system, the encrypted database where kids were listed like assets. He didn't know all the names, just his assignments. His job was to watch, to scout, to test reactions, see which kids were soft, quiet, obedient. Maya, he said, wasn't scared of strangers. That's how we knew she was good. I almost lunged through the door. But Avery placed a hand on my head, and I stayed still, because we needed the rest of what he knew. Later that night, back in Avery's SUV, we sat beneath a flickering street lamp outside the Carter house. The windows were lit inside, warm and golden. I could hear Hannah's voice floating out through the glass, light again, laughing. Avery stared through the windshield. "You hear that?" she whispered. I did. She turned to me. "That's why we do this." I lowered my head onto her knee. She scratched behind my ears. "You keep finding them, Shadow, even the ones that don't bark." I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. Not really. Because somewhere out there, another name was being written on another list, and I had learned how to find them before the ink dried. There are some faces I carry with me. Some are full of joy, mud-splattered grins, chubby hands offering half-eaten crackers, eyes wide with wonder at a dog who listened more than he barked. But there are others. The ones whose eyes never quite meet yours, who've learned not to reach out even when they want to. The quiet ones. Anna had those eyes. The photo came up in a folder labeled Anna 2021 PRG. Buried inside the Pavilion server, the FBI cracked open like a coffin. No full name. No school info. Just one picture. She was sitting cross-legged on a bare mattress. No blanket. Just a wall behind her, and a dim bulb casting a yellow shadow across her face. Big curls, dry and uneven, arms crossed loosely over her chest. And those eyes, like she'd already seen too much. Monroe was the first to say her name out loud. She whispered it, like speaking it too loud might break something sacred. "She looks 8, maybe 9?" Avery asked, standing behind her in the FBI war room. "About that," Shaw replied, pulling up an international records search. Folder was tagged PRG. We're assuming Prague. No match in Interpol. No US. Entry logs either. "She American?" Ryland asked. "No accent indicators," Shaw said. "But if she is, she's been missing long enough for everyone to forget." "No one just disappears," Avery muttered. I sat under the table, ears forward. The room was full of the scent of coffee and tension, burnt-out wires and human worry. Shaw scrolled through archived foreign registries. Then she paused. "Got something," she said. "Check orphanage intake 2018. Transferred from rural care home. First name, Anna. No surname. Disappeared 2021. Case marked as runaway. No follow-up. No local investigation." Monroe looked up. "She was never reported missing?" Shaw shook her head. "She aged out of public interest." A silence fell over the room. The kind that makes even seasoned agents look down at their shoes. That's the part no one wants to say out loud. Some kids slip through the cracks, and the world doesn't even notice. I did. Her image stayed with me, burned in the back of my mind like a smell you can't shake. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those curls, that slouch, that flicker of something human behind the numb. The next morning, Avery and I were back in the SUV, heading west toward a federal field office that had flagged a possible lead. She kept one hand on the wheel and one on a file folder resting on her lap. I lay beside her, head on her thigh, listening to the road hum beneath us. "You feel it too, don't you?" she asked quietly. I didn't move, just blinked once. She's not just another folder, another name, something about her. She trailed off, but I knew what she meant. They had her listed under status acquired. That word stuck in the back of my throat like a thorn. When we got to the office, the team already had new intel pulled from a secondary USB found in one of Donnelly's storage units. A second set of folders, some encrypted, some not. Inside, voice recordings. Dozens of them. Children reciting the alphabet, giggling. One boy saying the Pledge of Allegiance. One girl whispering, "He said it's our little secret." And then one file labeled Anna, 6YO, last wave. No one played it. Shaw just closed her laptop and said, "Send it to the digital forensics team. I don't want that in our ears unless it helps us find her." Avery nodded. Her hands were shaking. Later, back at the Carter house, Hannah was drawing again. This time it was a picture of a girl she didn't know. Just a silhouette, standing alone in front of a gray building. No face. No name. "What's this?" Rachel asked, crouching beside her. "It's the girl Shadow's thinking about," Hannah replied without hesitation. "He misses her." Rachel gave Avery a look. "You told her?" Avery shook her head. Not a word. That night, Hannah left a second bowl by the window, next to mine. "She might be scared if she comes," she whispered. I sat beside her, watching the moon through the glass. I knew she wouldn't come, not yet, but I also knew something was moving. Shaw got the call 2 days later. Interpol flagged a safe house in Prague linked to a known trafficking ring. A local tip, anonymous, said a girl matching Anna's description had been seen near a storage unit on the city's edge. A task force moved in. Inside, they found 6 children. 3 confirmed identities. 2 still waiting, and 1 girl, wrapped in a wool blanket, her eyes hollow, her voice quiet. When they asked her name, she whispered, "Anna." She didn't cry. She didn't ask for help. But when they handed her a postcard found in the suspect's suitcase, a photo of a dog with big ears and a gray muzzle, and a handwritten line that read, "You were never forgotten," she held it to her chest and didn't let go. Shaw called Avery the moment they confirmed it. "She's alive," she said. Shadow was right. I was lying by the fireplace when the phone rang. Avery answered, listened in silence, then crouched next to me. "She's safe," she said. "You found her." I didn't lift my head, but my ears twitched, and that was enough. It started with a growl. That's what they said on the news. If the dog hadn't growled, as if the warning sound I made, low, instinctual, older than language, was the beginning of it all. But the truth, that growl was late. The list was already in motion. Children already marked, folders already labeled. Maya, Hannah, Anna. And then the ones no one had time to say out loud, before the world shifted beneath them. By the time they cracked the second server, it was no longer a matter of if there were more names, it was how many. Avery and I were back at the precinct when the call came in. One of the agents, Griggs, I think, had stumbled on a backup drive buried in a storage locker in Atlanta. Another alias, another dead-end apartment, Another suitcase full of photos and receipts. But this time, the contents didn't just show pictures. They showed plans, drop schedules, target zones, behavioral assessments, and one tab labeled Quiet Tier. It had 20 names. Some had already gone missing. Some hadn't. Yet. One of those names was circled. Lucy Ann Whitaker, Glenview Elementary. Thurs, 2:45 p.m. Avery froze when she read it. Shadow, she said, holding the printed report with both hands. That's 20 minutes from here. She didn't finish the sentence. I was already standing. We didn't wait for backup. The drive to Glenview was short, but it felt long. Avery's knuckles stayed white on the wheel, her lips pressed into a line that didn't move, even when we hit traffic. Glenview was the kind of school with bright murals and old playground equipment that hadn't been replaced since the 90s. A line of minivans already circled the pickup zone, and kids were spilling out, backpacks bouncing, voices echoing like bells. Lucy was near the front, freckles, straight brown hair, a blue lunchbox swinging from her hand. She was talking to a teacher's aide, laughing about something. Avery parked across the street. Her eyes scanned the sidewalk, the fence, the alley. Then she said, "There." I saw him too, same build, same posture, leaning against a street lamp in a gray ball cap and a jacket that didn't quite fit. He wasn't watching the kids run or the cars pull forward. He was watching Lucy. He stepped off the curb. I leapt. The leash dropped somewhere behind me. I heard Avery shout, but her voice was already drowned out by the sound of my paws on the pavement. The man saw me coming. His eyes widened, his feet stumbled. But he didn't run. He reached into his jacket. I barked once, sharp, final. Everyone froze. Lucy stopped laughing. The aide stepped in front of her. The man froze with his hand halfway to his waistband. Then Avery was there, gun drawn, voice steady. Hands in the air. Now. He didn't argue, didn't move, didn't even blink. They cuffed him on the sidewalk, right there in front of the kindergarten butterfly mural. Inside his jacket was a burner phone. Inside the phone were texts. Option confirmed. Quiet demeanor. No visible father figure. Proceed Thurs. Back at the station, he gave a name that didn't match the license. Gave an address that didn't exist. He didn't scream, didn't beg. He just smiled. The kind of smile that made the fur on my back stand up. I wasn't going to take her, he said to Monroe during the interrogation. I was just making sure she was still good. Monroe didn't blink. Still good for what? For the list. They pulled more names from his phone, more school addresses, more kids. One stood out. James M. Torres, first grade, Bay Ridge Elementary. Avery leaned over the table. You were going after him too? The man shrugged. Wasn't my call. That night, we sat in the dim break room, the vending machine humming louder than usual. Avery sipped coffee that had gone cold hours ago. I lay at her feet, ears up, eyes on the hallway. You think it's over? She asked softly. I didn't move. She nodded. Didn't think so. Across town, Hannah was asleep under her eagle blanket, the moonlight stretching across her room like a hand. Rachel sat beside her, one hand in the girl's curls, the other still trembling from the call she'd gotten an hour earlier. He saved another one, Avery had told her. Rachel didn't ask who. She just whispered, "Thank you." Not to Avery, to me. I didn't hear it, but I felt it. Sometimes words aren't spoken. They're passed in the way a child curls her body toward a dog in the middle of the night. in the way a mother lets go of the breath she's been holding since her daughter left for school. In the way an officer drives without headlights so as not to wake the world as she chases the dark. We saved Lucy and James and 3 others that week. But the list hadn't ended. Not yet. Some names were still missing. Some folders still locked. But we were moving faster now. The hunters had blinked, and we were already closing in. They thought it was always the quiet ones. That's what their lists said, what their notes said. Low resistance, soft demeanor, not prone to conflict. The ones who wouldn't scream, the ones who wouldn't fight, the ones who wouldn't kick. But they forgot something. Even quiet kids have someone watching over them, and sometimes the ones who fight hardest are the ones they never expected. James Torres was 6, first grade. He liked banana slices on his peanut butter sandwiches and hated when his socks didn't match. He wasn't loud, but he wasn't shy either. Just one of those kids who spent more time looking at clouds than making noise about it. The kind of kid people overlooked. But not me. Not anymore. We'd found his name 3 days earlier, buried in the recovered list from the burner phone taken off the man at Glenview, Bay Ridge Elementary. Thursday pickup, 2:50 p.m. It was handwritten, not typed. An afterthought, almost, a side note on a growing list. But there are no side notes when it comes to children. Avery and I arrived an hour before dismissal, parked 2 blocks down, just outside a used bookstore that smelled of mildew and pencil shavings. She leaned against the hood of the car, sunglasses low on her nose, scanning the street like a hawk. I stayed in the back seat, quiet, waiting. At exactly 2:42, a man approached the rear gate of the school. No badge, no clipboard, no real reason to be there. He wore a windbreaker and old running shoes, his shoulders hunched in that way people do when they don't want to be noticed, but still want to see everything. Avery noticed first. "That's him," she whispered. I was already out the door before she finished the sentence. I didn't run, not this time. I walked, deliberate, letting him see me, letting him feel me. He glanced over his shoulder, then stepped back from the gate, pretending to scroll his phone. But I saw the twitch in his jaw, the slight shift in weight on his heels, the same signs every cornered animal gives off before they flee or fight. This one would flee. He turned and ran. I was after him in 2 heartbeats. We tore through the alley, then behind the gym building, dodging trash bins and spilled gravel. His breath came in short, wheezing gasps. Mine didn't falter. I could feel the ground in my bones, the wind slicing across my ears, the burn in my legs that reminded me I wasn't retired. Not really. He made it 5 blocks. Then he stumbled on a curb, falling hard onto the sidewalk. By the time Avery caught up, I had him pinned. My teeth weren't bared, but my presence said enough. She cuffed him without a word. The crowd around us didn't say much either, but someone was watching from the school gate. James. Small hands gripping the bars. His eyes were wide, not in fear, in recognition. Later, when Avery debriefed with Shaw over video call, the room behind her smelled like cheap carpet and overworked printers. I stayed near the door, half listening, half thinking. They'd found a second phone in the man's motel room, and another name. This one didn't come with a school, just a photo. A boy, 10, maybe 11, standing on a corner near a food truck, backpack slung over one shoulder, one foot resting on a soccer ball. The photo was grainy, taken from across the street, but clear enough to see the kid smiling. His name was Calvin Jr. Not related to the man we'd caught earlier, just an unfortunate namesake. They found his school, reached out to his parents, verified he was safe for now. But there was a message in the phone that struck deeper than the others. It read, "This one fights. Skip for now. Too visible." Avery read it twice, then looked at me. "They're adapting," she said. "Picking easier targets. Ones that won't bite back." I stood and growled. Not loud, not wild, but deep. Because I'd seen that shift before. In war zones, in ambushes. When the enemy changes tactics, it's not because they're giving up. It's because they're getting smarter. That evening, Rachel brought Hannah to visit the precinct. She carried a shoebox under her arm and a new drawing in her hand. This one had me standing on a rooftop, stars behind me, a cape waving over the city skyline. She said, "He doesn't just stop the bad guys. He watches even when no one else sees." I sat beside her while she opened the box. Inside was a small plush toy, a dog that looked like me. She'd stitched the name Shadow on its collar. "It's for the other kids," she said, "in case they're scared and don't have you yet." Avery crouched beside her, smiling softly. "We'll make sure it gets to them." Hannah looked up at me. "You found James," she said. "Right?" I didn't move, but she nodded like I had, then whispered, "Good." That night, she left 2 bowls again, mine and one smaller, just in case someone new needed a place to rest. And I watched the window, because the list wasn't done. The game had changed, but I was still here, still listening, still ready. There are things I remember that no one ever taught me to remember. They think memory in a dog is about patterns, commands, routines, smells tied to treats or punishment. But that's only part of it. There's a kind of memory that sinks deeper, like a scent that never fades. A moment you carry in your bones, not because you were told to, but because forgetting would feel like betrayal. That's how I remembered the map. It was pinned to the wall in the operations room, buried under layers of papers and printouts. I'd passed it a dozen times. It wasn't special, not at first glance. Just a regional diagram of school zones, color-coded by district. But I remembered the smell of it. Not the paper, the ink, the chemical resin used in the pushpins. It matched something I'd sniffed weeks before, buried in the bottom of Donnelly's first briefcase. It stuck with me. And when Avery stood in front of it one night, arms crossed, lip bitten in frustration, I stepped closer. Not barked, not growled, just stood. She glanced down at me, then followed my gaze. "What is it, Bud?" She leaned in, brushing away the corner of a loose paper. And there it was. Harbor View Lutheran School. Small, private, no state oversight, no security guard, no cameras. Same radius from a wooded alleyway as the others, same low-fence perimeter, same pickup pattern, but we hadn't flagged it because the name hadn't appeared in any file. Not yet. Avery stared at the location, then ran her finger along the route we'd seen on the burner phone's GPS. Son of a... She didn't finish. She grabbed her keys. We were in the car within 5 minutes. I didn't need to ask where we were going. I could feel it. The air was thicker that day. Clouds hung low over the hills, the kind of gray that made colors feel faded. We arrived just before dismissal, pulling into a street half a block down, headlights off. I could already smell something wrong. Not blood, not fear, just stillness. That heavy kind of quiet that hovers right before a storm. A line of SUVs crawled through the loop, teachers calling names into radios, kids huddled in coats with backpacks too big for their frames. And there, across the street, half-shadowed behind a recycling bin, stood a man in a yellow poncho. He wasn't holding a phone. He wasn't pretending to wait for anyone. He was just watching the gate, watching the children, watching one girl in particular. Red hair, purple backpack, a lunchbox that said, "Be kind." Maya. Avery's hand slid across her belt, but she didn't reach for her weapon. She looked at me. I didn't wait for the command. I jumped. Paws hit pavement like thunder. The man didn't run, not at first. His eyes locked onto mine, and I saw it. That flicker of calculation. Not fear, strategy. He turned down the alley and bolted. I chased him hard. The rain came down in sheets now, slicing through air and puddles. He dodged behind a stack of pallets, tried to cut across a back fence. I caught him at the waist, took him down, shoulder first. We tumbled through mud and gravel. I clamped onto his wrist, holding tight. No blood, no bites, just control. By the time Avery reached us, sirens were already howling in the distance. The man screamed, "I didn't touch her! I didn't lay a hand!" But in his pocket, Avery found the slip of paper. 3 school names. 3 time slots. One of them said, Maya. Thurs. 3:20 p.m. That was 5 minutes from now. We were 5 minutes early. In the interrogation room, he gave them a fake name. Didn't speak for 2 hours. But then Monroe laid out the folder. His handwriting, the map, the photos. He cracked. "They called me Rook," he said. "I didn't choose that. I didn't want to be anything." He talked about the forum, the passwords, the rating systems. Donnelly wasn't just a hunter. He was a broker, a planner. He'd built a whole framework, recruitment, strategy, execution. They weren't just picking kids. They were marketing them. "We didn't touch the loud ones," Rook said. "Too risky. But if they were quiet..." He didn't finish. Outside the room, Shaw looked at Avery. "I want every name that man ever whispered tracked down. I want teams at every school on his lists. I want dark web crawlers scraping Pavilion until the whole damn thing collapses." Avery didn't speak. She looked at me, and I understood. This wasn't a case anymore. It was a war. That night, back at the Carter home, Rachel poured hot chocolate for Hannah and sat with her on the couch. Hannah held the shadow plush tight to her chest, the red cape stitched on now frayed at the edge from how much she carried it around. "He stopped another one," Rachel said gently. Hannah looked up. "Maya?" Rachel nodded. Hannah didn't say anything for a long time. Then, "Did she scream?" Rachel paused. "No, she didn't have to." Hannah stared out the window, where the moon had just begun to rise, then whispered, "That's good." She reached down and patted my head. "I think you hear things even when we don't say them." I closed my eyes, because she was right. I heard everything. Even the silence, especially the silence. And I remembered, because someone had to. I never asked for a ceremony, never cared for the spotlights or the cameras or the way people clapped, like I understood applause. I didn't need a medal or a certificate or a bone shaped like a trophy. What I needed, what I still need, was to know that someone stayed safe, because I growled when others stayed quiet, because I listened when others looked away. That was enough. But the humans, they needed a ceremony. So they gave me one. It was held at the Capitol building, 6 months after the first growl that changed everything. The room smelled like marble and old coffee, and the walls echoed more than any hallway should. People wore suits and pins, and their shoes made sharp clicks on the floor that reminded me of hospital wings. Avery was there, standing tall behind a podium with a mic that whined once before settling into silence. She wore her dress uniform, pressed collar, polished badge, a ribbon I'd never seen before clipped just above her heart. She didn't talk about stats, didn't list off the number of kids we'd found or the men arrested or the servers shut down. She talked about trust. We put trust in things that wear badges, she said, voice even but soft. In IDs, in handshakes, in smiles. But sometimes it takes something more. She looked at me then. I was sitting on a small platform beside her, my vest freshly brushed, a silver canine insignia sewn onto one side. I didn't bark, didn't wag. I just looked back at her, calm as a stone. Shadow didn't wait for paperwork, she said. He didn't ask for confirmation. He listened. He acted. And because of that, kids are still here today. They gave me a standing ovation. I blinked once. Later that evening, we returned home to the Carter house. The porch light was on, and Hannah was waiting barefoot on the steps, arms wrapped around her favorite blanket. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I walked straight to her, let her wrap her arms around my neck, let her bury her face in the side of my head. She smelled like crayons and cocoa and the kind of safety I'd spent my whole life trying to give to others. "You're back," she whispered. I laid down beside her, and we sat there in the warm spring air until the stars started to show. Inside, Rachel had framed the new certificate, hung it next to the first one, just above the mantel. The original said, "For bravery." This one said, "For changing the course." I didn't read it, of course, but I saw the way she looked at it, and I understood. A few days later, a package arrived in the mail. No return address, just a brown envelope with my name written in careful human script. Inside was a photo, a girl, maybe 8, standing outside a brick building in Prague. Big curls, soft eyes, holding a postcard. My postcard. "You were never forgotten, Anna." Avery showed it to me. I leaned forward, sniffed the edge, same paper, same ink, same child, alive. Later that week, they raided 2 more sites, one in Portland, one in Atlanta, both linked back to aliases buried in the Pavilion server. Every arrest led to another. Every whisper opened a new door. But it wasn't just the FBI anymore. It was parents, teachers, bus drivers, janitors. It was Hannah standing in front of her 2nd grade class, voice small but strong, saying, "If someone makes you feel weird or scared, even if they say they know you can say no, you can yell, you can run." And the kids clapped. Not because she was loud, because she was right. The network started falling apart after that. They never expected children to speak. They never expected a little girl to point and say, "That's not my grandpa." And they sure as hell never expected a dog who didn't retire. Months passed. Leaves changed. The world kept moving. But not everything did. Every night, Hannah still set a second bowl by the window. Mine, and one smaller. Just in case. Because some part of her knew what I knew. The shadows don't stay gone forever. Sometimes they come back. Different shape, different voice. But I'd still be listening. I'd still be watching. Even now, when my muzzle has grayed and my legs don't carry me like they used to. Even when the stairs creak louder under me and my eyes don't catch the low light as quick. Because I don't believe in retirement. Not when there are still kids who need to be heard. Not when there are still lists to burn. Not when there's still one more name that hasn't been spoken aloud yet. I'm Shadow. I'm a dog. But more than that, I'm the one who didn't look away. The one who listened. The one who growled first. And I always will. If you've ever felt something was wrong before anyone else did, just type 1 in the comments. Not for me, but for every quiet voice that almost went unheard. And if my story meant something to you, go ahead and tap that subscribe button. Not because I asked, but because there are more stories. Some I've lived, some I've only smelled on the wind. But they're coming, and I'll be right here, waiting to tell them to you.